I literally just got back from Ascent Niagara, and I'm so proud of main deck showing. We had 2nd place main deck Alex, 8th place main deck Perfy, and 8 of us made it into day 2 in just one of the most fun ascents that we've ever been to. Now in this video, this is going to be a little bit different than normal deck profiles because you all know Wind Shadowstrike Tristan by now. So what I'm going to cover is the version of the list I played at the event and some of the unique things that I took into it, and also, in retrospect, the version of the deck that I would have played that might have taken me from my day 2 showing, possibly all the way into the top 8. So let's jump right into it. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Main Deck, and welcome back to another Grand Archive deck profile. But like I said in the intro, a little bit of a different one. We're going to go through the version of Wind Shadowstrike Tristan that I played in Ascent Niagara and got a day 2 finish. And we're going to then go over the slight tweaks that in retrospect I would have made and brought to the event that I think might have given me a better shot at getting into that coveted top 8 like my teammates Main Deck Perfy and Main Deck Alex. Now, here's the list. Of course, you guys are so familiar, I'm sure, with Tristan at this point, but just a brief overview in case you happen to be new here. I want to make sure we cover that too. Wind Shadowstrike Tristan is sort of a mid-range-ish wind-based deck that uses the power of Tristan. Of course, this is like based on the Tristan Recollection deck. You can just pick that up off the shelf and make the important edits to it, the addition of the Sadies, and a pile of other cards, and then you will get a pretty competitive deck because right out of the box, this Tristan goes all the way up to Tristan Shadow Dancer. She puts out 2 Ominous Shadow tokens, and you build up your prep counters and use your prep counters to deliver a lethal Shadow Strike to the opponent, backed up with powerful cards like Shadow's Claw, which allow your shadows to attack in for 2 each. This creates extremely lethal lines. You have a pretty easy 14 damage swing the turn you level just with the Shadow Strike if you've only built the sort of the bare minimum of the 4 prep counters going into the level 3 turn. And then you get to back that up with the powerful assassin interaction like Incapacitate to make sure your opponent can't stop your swing. So that's kind of the basic overview of the deck. Of course, there are a million deck profiles on this deck. It is a well-known deck since Mercurial Heart released. And a lot of the things that you see in these decks are very, very common these days. We have 3 copies of Slice and Dice, 3 copies of Mastermind Scheme, 3 copies of Dungeon Guide, and 3 copies of Shadow Strike. The 3-3-3-3. This is a common package that you see in all of these. These are all critical cards because Shadow Strike is, of course, our lethal line. Slice and Dice is our other lethal card and the one that can actually be used earlier to steal wins when you get a little more aggressive. Mastermind Scheme is the way to build those preparation counters in the late game from the, the minimum 4, 5, 6, 7 to the insane amounts that you sometimes stack 14, 18, 28, 40. You can get to huge numbers, and that's actually important. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the second version of the deck list. We have 4 copies of Sadie. Of course, Sadie is this critical ally that is used to not only build those preparation counters, but take care of allies on the board and give you that agility 3. So Tristan can almost play half of an extra turn every other turn cycle when she's able to do that. Otherwise, she's tough to get rid of and attacks the opponent and provides that aggression that you sometimes need because as a mid-range-ish deck, you need to be able to shift your tempo a little bit between dealing with the board and dealing with your opponent's life total as much as you can. Those 4 Incapacitates, of course, those are a staple in any assassin deck because this is such incredible interaction. It deals with so many things that stop your Shadow Strike lines. It also deals with cards that would otherwise kill you. Fireball, Incarnate Majesty from Merlin, anything. It deals with any action card in the game, so it's insanely good. Black Market Broker, I ended up going to 2 of for the Niagara list. The reason was I needed room for the 3 Ascent Protectors in here. I wanted to make sure I had those. And I had a lot of other tech in the deck I needed to fit in, so I ended up lowering the brokers to 2, but I would never fully take this card out. This card is sometimes just what you need in order to do a variety of things, build prep counters, hold down the board, provide a very difficult to deal with sort of just consistent aggression once you get to the 3 prep counters to give her stealth. So, huge fan of it, but it's a little clunky, that 4 cost, especially when you have more Ascent Protectors in the deck. just can get your hand a little too clunky sometimes. So I liked her at 2. She felt really good there. Now we have a wind package that allows us to gain that advantage that we need through either gaining cards or prep counters when combined with cards like Ascent Protector or Reclaim. Windmill Engineer, of course, star of the show for that in her ability just to be able to add a card to your memory when you play her. So you're immediately getting that card back. And then when you use that Reclaim or Ascent Protector, you generate advantage that way. Well, she also can deal damage to the board and press in there. Windblessed Lookout, the card from Mercurial Heart Ultra Edition that brought the deck sort of back after Korhazi Outlook was banned. This has the 1/3 2-cost, get a preparation counter. It's so cheap and efficient and gives you what you need even when you're level 0. This is a fine card to play on the first turn of the game. But when you're an assassin, you get that glimpse one as well, and sometimes that's really crucial just to try and dig, because we play a lot of disparate elements in this deck, a lot of little one-ofs, a lot of parts of the combo that need to come together, and you just need to get a little deeper in your deck, and that's what she's really good at. That 3 life, though, that's really the insane part of her, to be honest. It makes her so sticky and hard to get rid of, which is good when you build up these ensnaring fumes we'll talk about a little bit later. Fairy Whispers, you got to have this. Again, you need that dig, and Tristan really likes to play in the recollection step, or the recollection phase. Step's the podcast, phase is the part of the turn, and in that recollection phase, you're going to be doing things like Fairy Whispers, Surveil the Winds, just to be able to hold up your interaction for the opponent's turn, and then make sure you are able to use it before you recollect so that you get full value from your turn cycles. Now, we're getting a little bit more to the techie options. That these are sometimes flexible spots. I went with 3 Dream Fairies in the main, and I had no regrets at all about this card. Cheshire Cats, Serius, Incarnate Majesties or Majestic Spirits. There are so many insanely big problems that you need an out to deal with, and Dream Fairy does it. Even at one point had an opponent who did Liminal Guide with double Undying Dreams, so at that turn it was a 5/7, and then it became a 3/5 Liminal Guide that I just didn't want to have to deal with on the board, and then I think I top decked the Dream Fairy, played it, and that since it was ephemeral, it just banished the Liminal Guide entirely, which felt really, really good in that situation. Run 3 copies of Stifling Trap. Always a useful card to have. There are a lot of things that you kind of want to stifle, but one of the biggest ones is making sure you're up on this sort of tempo game by trapping your opponent's dungeon guide. But anything with an on-enter can be Stifling Trapped, and there are just a lot of things in the metagame where you might want to do this. And occasionally, very rarely, you might even want to Stifling Trap your own Ascent Protector's trigger so that it stays in play when you can't find another way to get an ally in play. That has to be kind of a desperation play, but it's there when you need it, and it's won me games to do that. Now, 3 copies of Veiling Breeze. These were huge. My game on stream that I played at Niagara, I Fairy Whispered into the second Veiling Breeze, and that's the only thing that kept me alive against that Merlin and allowed me to steal the game. It was lucky, but it was there because I played it in the deck and I found it, and it was excellent to have. You got to run these Veiling Breezes in there in order to be able to survive against a lot of things when you are just trying to get to that final turn to push for lethal. Surveil the Winds, obviously staple in Tristan. Draw a card, get a preparation counter. What more can you ask for? Reclaim, of course, returning allies back to your hand. Great with our Windmill Engineers, Windblessed Lookouts. Also huge. I mean, Reclaim was actually huge all weekend just to do this play where I will play something like a Dream Fairy to try and deal with their threat. They will Stifling Trap it, and in response to the Stifling Trap, you reclaim the Dream Fairy, which removes it from the board, which fizzles the Stifling Trap because it no longer has a target ally. That allows that Dream Fairy ability to go off and take the problem off the board still. Huge play. I did this multiple times, and I also did it with this little spicy one-of at the bottom that we'll talk about as well. But just being able to do that is great. But let alone when you're able to start with the Windmill Engineer, reclaim it, then level up, get all that card advantage. When you start that way, it always feels really strong. Now, 2 copies of Ensnaring Fumes main. This is a big one where people will have different variations on how many they put where. I expected to play against Seriu a decent amount, and I expected Genbus as well. So I had 2 in the main to make sure I had outs to it. But the funny thing was I only played against 1 Seriu and no Genbu the entire event. But instead, these Ensnaring Fumes are huge for me just for returning boards to hand. And again, that's something that you saw me do if you watched the live stream when I was on round 7 playing against a Merlin opponent. And I got an Ensnaring Fumes in order to bounce my 3 allies to hand, build a huge memory so that I could then use the Veiling Breeze to prevent a lot of the damage. So Ensnaring Fumes was able to kind of come in clutch, then still acted as a float when I leveled the next turn, filling my memory and then allowing me to still have a huge hand. And that huge hand is actually what allowed me then to go for the lethal line in the future turn. So being able to reclaim those allies to hand all with one card that was then floating memory feels really unfair in situations like that. It's a really, really strong card, even offensively like that. So if you're newer to Tristan, I highly recommend you start thinking a little bit about these Ensnaring Fumes lines to build your influence back up in order to allow yourself to kind of find lethal lines that wouldn't exist otherwise. Ascent Protector, already talked about him, but a huge part of that aggression line that you can take with Tristan, where you're just going to start pushing damage on them so that they're very softened up, so you don't have to build the prep counters, or you can even get lethal just by attacking raw with Shadow's Claw. Ascent Protector chunks in for a ton of damage, and also is a key defense that you need to have in play when you're going to face cards like decks like Water Diana or even Wind Wake Up. Just having something in play so that they have to find that purse, or they have to distant the purse in order to get rid of it, so that you can maybe just like survive another turn. Those games get really on edge sometimes, so Ascent Protector is really great from that. Otherwise, just clears boards, deals damage, and does so while bouncing your Windmill Engineer and Wind Bless Lookout to give you extra advantage. We talked about Shadowstrike already. 2 copies of Arrow Trap. Now, this is one of the spicier things that I added to this list. The Arrow Trap is a really cool little tech card that's super, super good right now against Cheshire Cats, against any of Guoja's arcane or otherwise divine beasts. And it's also really great against things like Majestic Spirit that are going to attack into you. Your opponent's not necessarily going to see that coming. Plus, it's a key tech card, again, against Wind Wake Up, Water Diana, these decks that are pushing pretty strong allies early on, or putting a ton of distant onto allies that they're attacking with. Arrow Trap has been really, really clutch. It's a great card to have. I liked it at 2. I didn't really want more than that, but it was really nice when I saw it. Now, my one-ofs in the deck, we'll just mention Innervate Agility quick, and people go back and forth on where to put these. I love the one-of in the main, because you just get in situations. It's not like it's your plan to use it in any game, but it becomes an out to a lot of problems just to be able to de-level, save yourself a turn. For example, you're fighting a Suited. Suited's not a great matchup. They push all in with a huge attack, with a huge attack turn coming. You stealth yourself, recover 5, level down, level back up, and now maybe you can de-guide up to another level or do something to start clearing the board and just sort of buy yourself enough time to get back into the game. I love having the one of in the deck, or if you're in a Tristan Mirror, which I face way too many of, you can hear that in the next episode of Recollection Step as well. Having that ability to level down back to level 2, or from Shadow Dancer back to Shadow Reaver, so you can go back to Dancer and get the shadows back out if they've been ensnaring fumes or something. Just, it's a flexible card in a lot of matchups. I really like having it as a spicy little one of in the deck. And now finally, Spirel, Schwartz Queen. This was a one of I only played in the list ultimately because I bought a CSR the night before and I looked pretty and I wanted to play it, but this saved me so many games. Spirel does some incredible stuff in her ability to deal spell-based damage to the opponent, because everyone playing as Tristan is just preparing to stop attacks the entire time. Spirel creates another route for you to win the game if you put enough pressure on the opponent, get them to have to start spending their cards to stealth themselves, to resolute stand, and then you can drop Spirel and finish the game off, and they are out of protection. They did not prepare to deal with the spell damage just by dealing 3 and then activating and dealing another 3. But also, in these games that are going longer, Razorgale, Merlin, the mirror match, you are able to put key reserve costs under her to make it much harder for your opponent to win the game. Against Razorgale, you put a 1 cost like a Fairy Whispers underneath so you can disable Veiling Breezes. In the mirror match, you put a 2 cost underneath so you can stop Slice and Dice and Shadowstrike in their tracks, something Tristan normally can't do. And then against Merlin, you could put 4 costs underneath to stop those expensive in-caps they play sometimes, or their fireballs, so that they just can't take you out as easily. Spirel's great. She's really good. I really, really liked her. I actually would almost want to try and find a spot for a second one. Now, in the list I'm about to show you, I did not find that, but let's talk really quickly about the sideboard here. An extra copy of Innervate Agility, allowing us to have a little bit more game against things like Seiryu, or things where aggressive decks where we need to innervate down to survive. Ensnaring Fumes, again, we're going as Guoja. Let's add the third one in. Let's make sure we have it. I have 2 copies of Regal Inquisition. I'll go over the material deck cards in a sec. 2 copies of Regal Inquisition because this is insane in the mirror match. You kind of a race sometimes to be the first one to find the Regal Inquisition. If you happen to face Luxem, it's really good. And I like it against Water Diana too in order to disable Song of Frost, stuff like that, so you can just push in. Cleansing Reunion was really there for Guoja, but I did bring it in against the Razorgales because you'll notice there were no Scatter Essence in the sideboard because we chose to took them out the night before. Did not expect to see Razorgale at the event. I don't know what we're thinking. We're in Canada. That's what they like to play there. But the Cleansing Reunions were still useful in some of those matches in order to disable their Veiling Breezes. You kind of have to find 2 against them because they play too many cards. But when you find that second one, you can disable, you can get rid of the Veiling Breezes so they can't cyclical them back, which felt really good. Crystallized Destiny, we have 2 copies of that as well, just as a generic kind of catch-all. I need to stop something that does a lot of damage, so we brought those in for that. And now talking about the material deck, I saved this for last with the sideboard and the material deck at the same time because there's kind of a grand plan here. We have a lot of the things you'd expect. Spirit of Wind, the Tristan levels, Shadow Reaver. But one of the interesting things here is I don't play Assassin's Ripper because I never find the Assassin's Ripper line to come up very often. It's just a little too niche and players play around it pretty well. Instead, I brought in Nullifying Lantern and Censor of Restful Peace, along with Terrafring, to make sure I just had options. Against every single deck, I wanted to be able to buy a turn of some kind, and that's what those are there for. By buying a turn, I wanted to give myself a chance to find dungeon guides, find outs, and push for lethal that way. This was okay. I ended up not being super happy with this plan, but in the sideboard, I would bring in Blinding Orb when I didn't like the Censor and the Nullifying Lantern, and usually if I didn't like one of those, Safeguard Amulet ended up being kind of a useful card to bring in as well. So those cards would come in and kind of swap out of the more niche cards whenever they were needed. I think that I would have focused more on just some more outs to close games out in the material deck, and I think actually Censor of Restful Peace in the metagame we went into wasn't as useful as I wanted it to be. It can be really good against Merlin, but also a lot of Merlins are prepared just to play through it at this point, and the punish doesn't feel as strong as them being a turn ahead of you getting to level 3. So I'm not positive that I would play it in retrospect at this event, and I know that's a little crazy because it is still a very powerful card that they have to respect, and it can cause problems for them, but I don't think in the Merlin matches I played, I ever really needed it when I materialized it. I could have taken a different line and still been pretty effective at closing the game out. So let's move on, I think with that segue in mind, to the deck that I would have played in retrospect. All right, now here is the list that I think I would have registered if I were registering for Ascent Niagara tonight. Now, I'll go over the changes. It's mostly the same list. There's no drastic changes here, really, but we've changed a couple of cards in the material deck and sideboard to make sure that we have matchups that are just a little bit more short up. Actually, I believe the main board I have here is entirely exactly the same. I was really happy with my main board. My game ones felt really good, other than some material deck choices. Now, the big one is I'm keeping Nullifying Lantern. Like I said, I pulled out Censor of Restful Peace, and instead, I think I would register Devouring Malice, because Devouring Malice would have been a way in the late game to find outs to problems. The biggest one is a little bit more spell-based damage, because I was just so happy with Spirel as a way to close it, but I would have liked a way to get a little bit extra, plus that recovery is kind of nice. And I had some games where I could get to 3 very fast and very healthy by playing defensively, but then I needed to replenish my influence quickly. Once you're at level 3, if you built your resources correctly, you have your preparation counters, you're less worried about your life total in certain matchups because you can redirect the important attacks to shadows. So I might even take that option of dealing 8 unpreventable and then drawing 2 in order to kind of find the cards I need again to get the combo off and go for it. Now, the real reason I like this is really that deal 3 and recover 3. The 3 debuff counters can be useful if you can't find a Dream Fairy and you just need to sort of disable a Majestic Spirit for long enough, take it from 4 to a 1 power unit. That seems pretty useful. So it's got a lot of flexibility. It seems like a card that I think I would have much rather had because I had some games where I just went late and my material deck became fairly useless because it was full of those options like the Lantern and the Sensor. So I think I would register that. Now, looking at the sideboard here, the major changes are I took out the Crystallized Destiny, because the Crystallized Destiny, it was a little useful against Water Diana, but otherwise it just really didn't come up. It wasn't a super useful card to have, and I really wanted a way to take out the Razorgale in the later game. So I would instead rather put in a single copy of Noble Dissolution. I'm going to shout out main deck Fern, who talked with me about Tristan before the event, during the event, and after the event about our thoughts. Fern also day 2'd with Tristan, slightly different lists, some different changes to it, but at the end we both said, I think a 1 of Noble Dissolution would have been crazy here, because even when Razorgale gets that hot start, you have that way to just level up and wipe out all of their Razorgales at once, which then makes them have to rebuild probably way too slowly. And I think you can close the game after that, especially in conjunction with this Nullifying Mirror that I don't know why I didn't register it, but I would have put it in my sideboard here over that Safeguard Amulet. It would have been a lot more useful into one of my harder matchups of the event, as I faced Razorgale 4 times in this event. That Nullifying Mirror, I think, would have changed the math and allowed me to push through and win those games that I ultimately couldn't, those game 3s where I was so close to securing the matchup. So that would have been huge. And then the last thing that would have been really good is a 4th copy of Mastermind Scheme. And I wanted that 4th copy because one of my outs to those Razorgale decks, where the game was going really long, was just to build up my Shadowstrike so high that even 2 or 3 Veiling Breezes couldn't stop it from being lethal. And I wanted to find Mastermind Schemes so badly, and I just couldn't. So I would have rather had that in, because they pull out things like Ensnaring Fumes in that matchup. They're not useful. Just throw in the Dissolution and the Mastermind Scheme. Get that Nullifying Mirror in over the Tariff Ring, depending if it's the version that actually won that had the Ardent Cloud Strikers. You maybe keep the Tariff Ring in and pull up something like the Backup Charger, or the Devouring Malice, maybe. Yeah, I'd have to think about it exactly, but the Nullifying Mirror comes in for sure along with those, and I think you have a little bit of a better game without going all in on Scatter Essences, which, because of Cyclical Breeze, I'm not as big a fan of as a solution to that matchup. It slows them down in the same way Staggering Strike just kind of slows Tristan down but doesn't kill her. And I'd rather have Dissolution, which I think closes the door because it buys you a lot more time in the late game. Plus, Noble Dissolution is good against other Tristan matchups, taking care of Phantasias. It's good against Genbus. It's a card that I think would be fairly useful. Oh, and against Arasana. When the Arasana drops double Fertile and has the Fragmented Spirit Shard, the Dissolution, if you go to 3 fast and just kind of turbo and Dungeon Guide, you Dissolution their whole board, and I think you can buy yourself some extra time that way too. So yeah, I really like it. Those are the changes I think I would have made with that Devouring Malice in the material deck as well. So just a slight update, but if I were registering a Tristan list for Auckland and I'm expecting people to play Razorgale at it, this might be the version I would play. But let me know in the comments down below. What do you think about these Tristan lists? What would you change? What am I missing? And have you tried Spirel? Because if not, I really think you should. Spirel was my breakout all-star of the weekend. Just an insanely powerful card. I loved her, and I really would like to find a slot for a second one, maybe in the sideboard. But decks are always being tweaked, so this is certainly not a perfect list. And shout out to Asuna, who actually made top 8 with their version of Tristan as well. Definitely go to Fractal of Insight, take a look at their list. But if you want to see these deck lists, both of them are linked in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. If you're heading to Auckland, good luck this week. And otherwise, I'll see you all at Ascent Akihabara next month. It's coming up so fast. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you all in the next one.